There's danger on the edge of town. Ride the King's Highway. Weird scenes inside the gold mine. Ride the highway west, baby. What's up? Let's go. All right, so tonight we are covering Sophocles, Oedipus Rex. Sophocles, Oedipus Rex. And I thought that we would do this. I kind of decided to do this on the spur of a moment, you guys, because there's so much to cover. There's so many works of literature to cover, and sometimes it's hard to determine where we should go next. But you know what? I thought now would be as good a time as any to cover Sophocles because, it's like all this stuff appears in the media and in culture, in the, zeitgeist or whatever. And the Oedipal complex with fake and Gahay and pervert Freud, right, sort of pops up all the time. So I thought now would be as good a time as any to cover Sophocles and talk about the Oedipal cycle, the Oedipus complex, the Oedipal cycle. Of course, if you're in England right now, right, then you are saying, why is he saying Oedipus Rex? It's Oedipus. It's Oedipus Rex, right? Come on now. Wanka. You know what? I'm going to call it Oedipus because I'm American and I've always called it that, except for, of course, when I was educated. But I'm going to keep calling it Oedipus. That's what we're going to call it. And so we're going to talk about Sophocles, Greek tragedy, Greek ritual, ritual in terms of the ritual of drama, the Bacchic rite. We're going to mention a little bit Euripides and the Bacchantes, the Bacchus plays, the of drama, and how religion ties in with ritual. And listen, thank you so much for joining me here at my channel. And if you would please look at the links that my beautiful, wonderful mods, my homies, are dropping in the chat. If you're watching this later, especially, please look at the description in the video. Of course, Gil Bates is going to be attacking us throughout, and we're going to keep having probably video problems. I don't know why. There's nothing I can do about it. I've been doing the best I can, y'all. So we're just going to keep going. Hopefully the audio is still working and things will work themselves out. Listen, also tonight, don't forget that right after this is over, we are going to be going over to our buddy JD's house, right? Jay Dyer at Jay's Analysis for the 90K Chad Nerd stream. Listen, we're all sort of in JD's big house right here. So, of course, we're going to be over there for the 90K Nerd stream because a lot of us have been there for a long time, many years. We've seen the 25K Nerd stream. We saw the 80K Nerd stream. We saw the 50K Nerd stream. We're going to see the 100K Chad Nerd stream. So, of course, we're going to be there. And we're going to be doing, of course, JD's going to be doing Nick Cage tonight. So, of course, we're going to be there. Shouts out again to all of our homies. Shouts out to JD, to Tristan at Primal Edge Health, and to Church of the Eternal Logos, David Patrick Harry, all of whom have supported this channel by sharing streams, discussing my channel. And I got something big coming up with one of those guys. I won't say who, but it's going to be a big surprise, and we're going to be covering something cool coming up very soon. So stick around, right? Tonight, we're going to be covering Sophocles and the circa 400 BC play Oedipus Rex, which is in the Theban cycle, right? So where should we get started? I guess we should get started with the thumbnail pic, right? And yes, Goose says, is that Jim Morrison in the thumbnail? Yes, indeed, that is the lizard Kang, the lizard person Kang in the thumbnail. And why, you may ask, did I put Jim Morrison in the thumbnail pic? That's a picture of Jim Morrison in Mexico. Well, The reason that I put Jim Morrison in the thumbnail pic is because when I think of Oedipus Rex, when I think of the Oedipal cycle, you guys let me know if the volume's okay, because I see that I see the video is all scratching. There's really not much I can do about it. So let me know with a thumbs up if the audio is okay. Thank you, homies there. And also, please, while you're hitting thumbs up, you guys, please, everybody in the chat, and if you're watching this later, especially, please hit the thumbs up on the video. And also, thank you, Goose. And also, please make sure that you leave a comment. So many of y'all, so many of my friends are so great about leaving comments, and I really, really appreciate any kind of little comment. Of course, like Sam Hyde says, don't leave a negative comment. But please leave me a comment now or when the video's over, under the channel, under the video, because it helps me with the algo, of course. Yeah, a little pixelated, Jeff says to me, but we rolling. Okay, yes. Shouts out to my main homeboy, Jeff, on Instagram, and looking at the meme king. You are missing it. You're missing out on life, okay? Because my homie right there is the cringe meme king, okay? Nobody does it better than Jethro, my main homeboy. Also, if you're not following Exposing Powerful Lies live streams, you're also missing out on YouTube, because my homie right there makes based content. Yeah. So anyway, let's keep going, you guys. Why did I put Jim Morrison in there? Because I learned about Oedipus. I learned about Sophocles from The Doors when I was like 12. And in fact, right before this, I was looking for this. I have this old book of plays that I remember reading when we were going on holiday to the beach one time, and I read it in the 90s minivan, the back of the 90s minivan, listening to Red Hot Chili Peppers in 1992. And I was reading Oedipus Rex. And so that's where I learned it. And of course, The End by The Doors, the last song on their self-titled album, is a purely Oedipal song. It what the Oedipal complex is, if there's such a thing, right? And we're not really going to talk so much about Freud and psychology and all that shit tonight. Forgive my language, but I can do without Freud. And I'm not saying that it's not to read and to understand Freud. I think that you should be reading. I think anybody should be reading. But we're not really going to get into that. That's not really our purview here. We'll talk about it sort of. We'll kind of gloss over it a little bit. Mainly, we're going to be talking about the rituals involved, what ancient Greek theater is in terms of ritual. And we're going to be deep diving into the text of Oedipus Rex tonight and discussing what's the meaning of the play. And as usual, I think that our interpretation of Oedipus Rex may be mistaken or skewed. Your own reading may be. I'm not saying that your reading, if you're watching this later, is wrong. I'm saying that we're going to come up with a different interpretation of the play, one which I think is accurate, especially in terms of the worldview expressed within the play, and is slightly different from the normal interpretation or the average status quo interpretation of this play. But I have Jim Morrison in the thumbnail because the Doors really explain, Jim in his song really what the Oedipal cycle is, and I learned it from him. And also, you know what? Yes, and so I know I know the Doors better. I'm not bragging, folks, but I know the Doors. I think legitimately better than anybody in the world, because I'm always going to like the Doors. They've always been my favorite band, and that's never going to stop. I'm not going to let anybody tell me what to do. So get out of here. That doesn't mean anybody else has to like them. And also, as far as music goes, right? It's okay to say the Doors are, the boomer band. They are. And of course, I know all the stuff. People always ask me do I know this about Jim? Do I know that about Jim? Yes, I know about Jim. I know everything about Jim. I know everything about his life. Of course, I know that his dad was Admiral Morrison and was at the Gulf of Tonkin. I know that he was military industrial complex. I know that that Dave McGowan named the book Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon after this song, Weird Scenes Inside the Gold Mine. Of course I know that. I know that Jim got married in a damn demonic Wiccan ceremony to the triple goddess and all that shit. And I hate that, of course. But as far as the Doors music goes, I've always liked the Doors music, and I'm going to keep listening to it. That doesn't mean I have to agree, right? That doesn't mean I have to agree with the I don't want to say message or whatever in the songs, but do I like the music? Yeah. And I think it's important that actually comes up here, right? Because we're talking about the Oedipal complex. So let's start off. We're going to talk about really quickly, what is Oedipus Rex about? You may not have ever read Oedipus Rex. I love you guys, by the way. And I wasn't seriously going off by the way, right there. No, I was just saying. Anyway, so yes, do I know? Are we going to cover the plot of Oedipus Rex? Yes, we are. You may not remember Oedipus Rex. You may not have read it, and that's okay. And this may be helpful for you and informative if you have read it, and you are a scholar of Oedipus Rex. Then hopefully you also will find something to glean from this, right? So let's start off by looking at the lyrics of The End, written by Jim Morrison in his book, The American Night. This is a book of Jim Morrison's poems. Of course, I've got all of his books here. I've got Wilderness. I've got The Lords and New Creatures. I've got The American Night. I've got all the biographies. I've got all the studies of their lyrics. I've always had them. So let's look at this. Okay. So he says, this is the end, right? Beautiful friend. This is the end, my only friend, the end. Now, what does that mean? The end, right? Well, he's talking about the end of time. He's talking about, the speaker here is talking about the end of his time. Because with Oedipus, it's interesting how his end is his beginning. And we'll look into what that means. He says, of everything that stands, the end. No safety or surprise, the end. Oedipus has no safety or surprise. We're going to see that he damns himself in this play. It's one of the points of the play. I'll never look into your eye again. Interesting, because the word eye, eyes, and the verb to see recurs. It recurs throughout this play. The climax of the play. If you know what I'm with Oedipus, we're going to get to that. He says, can you picture what will be? Can you picture? Because it's a visualization. So remember that Oedipus can picture. He can mentally picture. He can literally picture. But at the end of the play, he's going to have to figuratively picture. So limitless and free, desperately in need of some stranger's hand in a desperate land. Why is he in a desperate land? The speaker in the poem is Oedipus. Why is he going to have to? Why is he in a desperate land? Because Oedipus is Theban by birth, but he is in exile in Corinth. Then he returns to Thebes, sort of living out a prophecy in the play, playing into his fate. We're going to see what the idea of fate in this play, what that means, and whether there's fate or free will. Well, of course, there's free will in our world. We know the truth is that there is free will, of course. And we're going to see that that the demons in this play are strong in terms of their influence in his life. And then at the end of the play, he goes into exile again, right? Remember that the definition of tragedy with Aristotle, the tragic hero has to fall from a great height, right? Into death or exile. And yes, he falls into exile in this, which makes it a little unique in terms of classical tragedy, or even in terms of later when we think about Renaissance tragedy, that nowadays in modernity and modern literature, of course, post-Enlightenment democratization of the world, right, and of the West, tragedy has a completely different connotation, right? something tragic is like anything bad that happens to anyone. But in terms of the classical definition of tragedy, tragedy is when the hero, right, the king, the emperor, falls from a great height to a low place of death or exile. And of course, in this one, he's going to go into exile. He's not going to die, which makes it again unique. He says, now Jim has a sort of a this is sort of a, I don't know what, iconoclastic here. He says, lost in a Roman wilderness of pain. Now, of course, it's not Roman, it's Greek, but the but what he's saying is truthful in the sense that it is Roman in terms of its temperament and in terms of its violence, if that makes any sense. Also, I picture a sort of a Greco-Roman mask when I read this. The idea of masks is going to play an important role in Oedipus Rex because it plays into the ritual element of ancient Greek tragedy. And all the children are insane. Well, Oedipus is insane. He goes insane, and he's sort of insane in a metaphorical sense in terms of he loses his mind because of what Tiresias, the blind seer, will reveal to him. And he says, and all the children are insane. All the children are insane, waiting for the summer rain. Right? Remember Apocalypse Now? Now, there's danger on the edge of town. Ride the King's Highway. Weird scenes inside the gold mine. Ride the highway west, baby. So what is he talking about here? Well, let's get into Oedipus Rex, Oedipus the King, and talk about the plot and some of the themes of this play. So what happens in Oedipus Rex? Well, the start of the play has Oedipus coming into Thebes. Thebes is one of the ancient cities, really an Egyptian city, but part of the the Hellenistic Empire, or at least the classical world. And he remember that Oedipus solves the riddle of the Sphinx, right? And the riddle of the Sphinx is, what what kind of thing, walks on 4 legs, 2 legs, and 3 legs, and it's, obvious, right? It's a man, right? He's a baby crawling, yes, and then walking. He's a biped, as Norm Macdonald says. He's a biped, and then finally walking with a cane, yeah. And then Oedipus solves that, unlocks the riddle of the Sphinx, becomes the king of Thebes. So at the beginning of the play, he walks into the forum. And he's confronted by the city they're sick. The entire city is sick. And hello, Mort Goldman. How does this relate to now, you guys? Well, because they are the victims of a plague. There is a virus that is infecting all the people in the city. They are all dying from plague. And he says, basically, Oedipus says, what's the cause of this plague, right? And he is told it is a pollution. Now, that's not in terms of a Greta, blah, 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 pollution, right? This is not a Extinction Rebellion pollution. This is a pollution in terms of a sickness of the soul, a sin. Someone has committed a grave sin, and it is causing the entire city to fester. Now, what does this mean? Well, you can read this. You could certainly read this play as let's say, a pagan anthropological study of the cycles of the season. This is like a Golden Bough, Jesse L. Weston, Fisher King idea of the king who rules over the land has been wounded with the lance, and so he is unable to produce, and therefore the city and the world and his kingdom and the vegetation is all dying, reflecting winter, right? He has to quest and achieve the Holy Grail so that spring may arise again, right? In purely like anthropological terms. And that's sort of what happens in the play. In terms of the metaphysical and the deeper, I'd say the real meaning I take away from this play. Remember that Oedipus, when he discovers this, and he discovers this from Tiresias, the blind seer, who is one of the archetypal characters in the play, and who reappears in T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, right? The Wasteland. Oedipus curses the person who has caused this. This is just like Macbeth cursing himself unknowingly, because he finds out later on in Oedipus Rex, he later finds out that he himself is the cause, because he has committed a sin that he is unaware of, but that when he realizes that he has actually done, he violates himself in a way that makes him live, but not able to see the result of his own unwitting sin. Now that's sort of misleading, because Oedipus does commit a sin of which he has a particular knowledge. What do I mean by that? Well, we find out through the course of the play that Oedipus is the child. He's the child of Laius, and who is it? Jocasta. Who's his wife? Jocasta. Jocasta in a spell. I mean, Jocasta. That's so lame. I'm sorry. And basically what happens is, and then she has a brother, Creon. Anyway, what happens is his father learned that he would be cursed. And this is sort of, this is like replayed by Chrétien de Troyes when he talks about Uther Pendragon and Arthur, right? That basically, like, there would be a curse on this guy. And his son would come to the prophecy is that his son would kill him, right? Would overtake the throne. So he determines to have his child killed. He wants to kill his own unborn child. But his mom, and they cast him out, but his mom doesn't want that, right? She's not willing to do that. And so through a series of events, basically, they lie and they say that they did kill the young Oedipus, but instead he's taken away to a foreign land and he's raised by somebody else, right? And Oedipus is raised not knowing anything about Thebes or anything about his history. And then one day he decides to leave Corinth, because he ends up being he ends up in the hands of the royalty at Corinth, and he decides he wants to leave his homeland, even though he doesn't know that he's in exile. And he wants to wander. So he's on the road. He's on the highway west, right? And he comes across danger on the edge of town. And what do I mean? Well, there's a chariot coming down the road, and they knock him off the road. And in this fit of road rage, Oedipus says, "Yo, why you knock me off the road?" Guy gets out and he says, "Get out of the road, pleb, scumbag," or whatever. And what does Oedipus do? Well, he kills the guy. He kills the guy on the road. He kills the entire party of people. Now, this is witnessed by a shepherd. And anyway, Oedipus says, well, done with that. I just killed a bunch of people. I'm going to keep on going. I'm going to ride the King's Highway west, because he's on the road to Thebes. He ends up in Thebes. When he gets to Thebes, he meets this lady. He thinks she's pretty fine. She's an older lady or whatever. He meets her. They fall in love. She recognizes something in him. She misses her old husband. She finds out later on that her husband dead because he never came back, right? She doesn't know what happened. And then what happens? Well, they fall in love and they get married, and Oedipus becomes the king. And then they have a child. Bum, 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 right? Spoiler alert, nerds. Turns out, what's the sin? What's the pollution? Well, the guy that Oedipus killed on the road was his own dad, right? He smoked his own pops on the road. And even worse, the fine woman that he married is his mom's. Oops. And it turns out that his daughter, right, is his daughter's sister. Oh boy. This is not good. So when when Oedipus finds this out, of course, he takes a brooch from Jocasta and he stabs his eyes out, and he wanders the earth. He actually reappears in the other parts of the Theban cycle, but he wanders the earth with blood trickling down his eyes because he cannot look on what he has done. Right now, what does that mean? Well, Freud took this, as he called this the Oedipal complex. And the Oedipal complex is essentially that, human beings, like in his, interpretation of dreams, human beings have this thing deep down where, they want to kill their dad and marry their mom. Okay, well, what does that mean? I mean, that means essentially that, you want to overtake, your own dad and like go out in the world and achieve your own thing. And, I guess your dad gets mad because he's no longer the alpha figure or whatever. Right. And you want to find a woman who has all the best qualities of your mom, right? In terms of like, you want somebody who's nourishing and cares for you. As far as all the other like pervert stuff, I'm not really going to get into that because Freud was a fucking pervert. I mean, excuse me, was a pervert. And, I don't know, all the other, I mean, even Harold Bloom talks about how Freud was, it's sort of basic level. I was reading an essay yesterday by T.S. Eliot talking about Dostoevsky, and how T.S. Eliot said that in the early 20th century, when psychology was fresh and was new, he talks about how the sort of, I don't know, nouveau emphasis on Freud and on psychology would be detrimental to critical thought in the 20th century, because even though it sort of fits the theme of modernity, right, and the like breakdown and degradation of society, it's also pretty basic level. There's nothing, it doesn't go any deeper. It doesn't go, yes, I mean, he claims to go into, Jung, of course, claims to go into, goes into archetypes and everything. And if you want more about Jung, of course, please look at some of our streams, some streams by our friend Young Booma, Jay Dyer, or of course, David Patrick Harry, Church of the Eternal Logos, who are much more adept at discussing metaphysics and psychology. But in terms of just basic literary thought, Eliot was saying that the interpretation of meaning or finding meaning through Freud would be a mistake. And so that's about all I have to say about Freud. But I would say that in terms of some of the archetypes of this play and what it means, let's look at some of the actual literature. Let's look at some of the text here. And I want to show you some things that we can discover by reading the text. So right off, the play begins. Oedipus begins the play, is the first speaker. And he says, children. Interesting that the very first word of the play is children, because remember, he thinks of the city, or rather his kingdom, as his children because he's the ruler. But it's interesting to note that right off the bat, the emphasis is on children, on his, and he unknowingly is talking about himself as a child and his own children, right? And he says, children, young sons and daughters of old Cadmus, why do you sit here with your suppliant crowns? The town is heavy with mingled burden of sounds and smells of groans and hymns and incense. I do not think it fit that I should hear of this from messengers, but came myself, I, Oedipus, whom all men call the Great. He turns to the priest, right? This is the pagan Greek priest, and he says, you're old and they are young. Come, speak for them. What do you fear or want that you sit here suppliant? Indeed, I'm willing to give all that you may need. I would be very hard should I not pity suppliants like these. Now, right off the bat, right? Pity, fear, terror. And he says in this one, remember, this is a verse play. Okay. It's written in, I think it's written in hexameters, but we're reading the English translation here, of course. But he says, the line is, indeed, I'm willing to give all. And of course, he will give all. He's willing to give all, he says to the priest, and he unknowingly means it. The priest says, "O ruler of my country, Oedipus, you see our company around the altar. You see our ages. Some of us like these who cannot yet fly far, and some of us heavy with age. These children are the chosen among the young, and I, the priest of Zeus. Within the marketplace sit others crowned with suppliant garlands at the double shrine, a palace, and the temple where Ismenus gives oracles by fire. King, you yourself have seen, King, you yourself have seen our city reeling like a wreck already. It can scarcely lift its prow out of the depths, out of the bloody surf. A blight is on the fruitful plants of the earth. A blight is on the cattle in the fields. A blight is on our women, that no children are born to them. God that carries fire, a deadly pestilence, is on our town, strikes us and spares not. And the house of Cadmus is emptied of its people, while black death grows rich in groaning and in lamentation. We have not come as suppliants to this altar because we thought of you as of a god, but rather judging you the first of men in all the chances of this life, and when we mortals have to do with more than man. You came, and by your coming saved our city, freed us from tribute, which we paid of old to the Sphinx. Cruel singer, exposition here. This you did in virtue of no knowledge we could give you, in virtue of no teaching. Do you get how everything so far, right, is a double meaning? Right? Not quite a pun, double meaning here, because he came with no knowledge, meaning they had no knowledge of him, but Oedipus had no knowledge of himself. Right from the beginning of the play, this is foreshadowing how he came with no knowledge of the fulfilling of the thing that he has been a victim of. But that doesn't mean that I think that this play is total destiny, fate. Oh, I put in the chat, in the video description, that quote from King Lear, right? About we are but playthings to the gods, that kill us for their sport. King Lear is also, a pre-Christian pagan, sort of Celtic pagan play, where Lear is wandering the moors, sort of shouting out into the void. He's shouting out into the void because he has no meaning, because he doesn't have God, right? And this play, I think, is a perfect example of the wandering in the darkness on the edge of town, right? They are ruled by a demonic system. And the people in this play, he blinds himself to the fact that he has unwittingly or not played into a sick system where the sins of the fathers are on the sons, because in Thebes, in this cycle, they worship these demonic figures, right? Who treat these pagan god demons, who treat these people like playthings. Does that make sense? And he says, it was God. By the way, when he talks in the play about it was God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, he's talking about Zeus. And he says, it was God that aided you, men say, and you are held with God's assistance to have saved our lives. Now, Oedipus, greatest in all men's eyes, have falling at your feet. We all entreat you, find us some strength for rescue. Perhaps you'll hear a wise word from some God. Perhaps you will learn something from a man. For I've seen that for the skilled of practice, this outcome of their counsels live the most. Noblest of men, go and raise up our city. Go and give heed. For now this land of ours calls you its savior, since you have saved it once. Right? Like he's going to be the savior. He ain't no savior. That's the whole point. He's not the savior. So let us never speak about your reign as of a time when First, our feet were set secure on high, but later fell to ruin. Oedipus says, I pity you, children. You have come full of longing, but I have known the story before you told it only too well. All right, I want you to listen to the alliteration in this line. I mean, in these next few lines. I know you are all sick, yet there is not one of you, sick though you are, that is as sick as I myself. Your several sorrows each have single hope, and touch but one of you. My spirit groans for city and myself and you at once. You have not roused me like a man from sleep. Know that I have given many tears to think, gone many ways, wandering in thought. But as I thought, I found only one remedy that I took. Let's see. He went to the Pythian temple that he might learn there by what act or word I could have saved the city. As I count the days, it vexes me what ails him. He is gone far longer than he needed for the journey. But when he comes, then may I prove a villain if I shall not do all the God commands. So you notice the alliterative, sibilant sounds in this, because he is snake-like. He is speaking with a forked tongue. And in fact, I'm not just throwing that out there randomly, but in fact, Oedipus literally comes to a fork in the road when he kills his father, right? On the king's highway, on the edge of town, he comes to a fork in the road. I'll see you at the crossroads, right? He comes to the crossroads where he makes his choice, he makes his decision, he takes the left-hand path, and he kills his own dad. Okay, Ellie says, my internet down, trying to fix it. Shout outs to Ellie, beautiful Eliana. Shouts out to Jeff, Jerry, and all our homies. Shout out to Moon, Rachel, Base Drum School Mom. Shout out to Nate Ski, all of our friends out there. I appreciate you being here. And of course, we'll all be in JD's nerd stream right after this. Okay, so what does he say? What does he mean when he says, but when he comes, then may I prove a villain if I shall not do all the God commands? Well, that's Shakespearean, right? Shakespeare took that. That I may prove a villain. What's that from? It's Richard III, right? We covered Richard III. Remember we did our Richard III stream? Because I cannot prove the smiling. Remember in the opening soliloquy of Richard III, right? Then I shall prove a villain. Let's see. He says, moving on here, we have Creon enters. I'm going to kind of skip to specific sections. Creon enters, and he says, let's see. His face is bright, O holy Lord Apollo. Grant that his news too may be bright for us and bring us safety bright, because Apollo is the sun god, right? Creon says, they were all killed save one. He fled in terror, and all he could tell us nothing in clear terms of what he knew, nothing but only one thing. Okay, so Oedipus sent Creon to the oracle at Delphi to find out what was the cause of this. Is Jay streaming on another day? Nasky says, it's not tonight. Oh, my bad. Well, thank you, Nasky, for telling me. So, yeah, we find out that Creon went to the oracle at Delphi to discover what was the cause of the plague, right? And Creon comes back and says, okay, we found out all this stuff. And basically he says to him that he basically tells him about the fact that Oedipus killed his own. And it's interesting that these people have such little, this is like really a window into the elites that we still see now, right? Because these people have so little virtue, right? They have so little virtue that Oedipus himself killed a dude on the road, and he doesn't even think of it. It doesn't even matter to him, right? And what is the oracle? I think Jerry said the oracle as in the Matrix. Yeah. So I've actually been to Delphi. And you know what does a really good job of showing what the oracle at Delphi is 300. You remember when in 300 they're showing, there's like a montage, there's a sequence where like they're showing the oracle, and then they show and they're breathing. They're like doing this, like slow motion dance because they breathe in the vapors from the oracle. And the oracle, basically, what it is the oracle is set like probably on like a volcanic fault, right, in Greece. Actually, when I went to Greece when I was 14, I went to Italy, Greece, and Turkey, and we took a cruise around the Aegean. Um, and I went to Patmos. I went to Rhodes, bunch of places. Anyway, when we went to Delphi, when we were in Greece, we were in Athens. I was we went with like a school trip, and I was sitting on we were in my friend's room, and I was sitting on the bed, and like I remember thinking like, dude, who's jumping on the bed? Right? Is somebody in the other room jumping on the bed? What's that? And then I went out onto the balcony where, of course, we were 14, but we were all out there drinking wine and liquor and smoking cigarettes because we were in Europe and they would just sell them to us, right? And that was, we were secretly doing that. We got caught actually, but whatever. So, and I went out there and I was like, what's going on? And then, and the hotel was shaking. I remember thinking like, what is this? And then I realized, damn, this is probably an earthquake, because there'd just been like a big earthquake in Turkey before we went. And yeah, it was an earthquake. And it turns out like it was one of those huge earthquakes that like destroyed entire cities all the way in Turkey. But we felt it in Athens. So that was my first earthquake. Yo, if you're living in California, shouts out to, if you're okay out there, you probably be surfing earthquake waves all the time. But that was my first earthquake. Anyway, so Delphi is probably like on a fault line or something, and the vapors like rise up through the cracks. They built a temple on top of it, and then they would have the Vestal virgins, who are like the daughters of the elite, who are actually just sex TRAFK'd, Wexner, Victoria's Secret angel, monarch, victims to these twisted demon priests who are up there doing horrible things to them and doing SRA, right, and mind controlling them, and probably feeding them, hallucinogenics and drugs and opium and all kinds of stuff. And basically they would disassociate, go into a trance, probably possessed by a demon, and they would say a bunch of stuff, which then the priest would interpret, and that would be the oracle, right? Just to give like, I don't know, as basic a breakdown as I can. What I think, I actually genuinely believe that, right? And so they come back though, and they tell him, this is what happened. And Creon says, this man said that the robbers they encountered were many, and the hands that did the murder were many. It was no man's single power. So they tell Oedipus, no, it was a bunch of people that killed the old king, right? Oedipus says, how could a robber dare a deed like this were he not helped with money from the city, money and treachery? In other words, this is conspiracy, right? Because Oedipus says, whoa, nobody can kill the old king unless he had help from the power elite. Well, he actually did have help from the power elite, because it was you, homeboy, and you are one of them, right? That's the interesting thing about this, right? It wasn't no bunch of random highwaymen. It wasn't no, Oswald. It was you, right? It was you doing it, Mr. Dulles. Creon says, that indeed was thought, but Lies was dead, and in our trouble there was none to help. Oedipus says, what trouble was so great to hinder you inquiring out the murder of your king? Creon says, the riddling Sphinx induced us to neglect mysterious crimes and rather seek solution of troubles at our feet. Oedipus says, I will bring this light. I will bring this to light again, which is the idea of seeing and illumination, which is his end. That's why this song is called The End, right? The end of soft light, because it's all darkness after that, right? This is why it's the end, because his end, Oedipus's end, comes from his beginning, right? He was cursed from birth, then plays into it. He has agency in these things. It's the end because from forth the fatal loins, he produces this daughter right? This is the end. It's the end of his line. He says, King Phoebus. Phoebus is another name for Apollo, right? We mentioned that in the last stream, where we talked about that famous line from Much Ado About Nothing. Roundabout the gentle wheels of Phoebus, roundabout dapples the drowsy east with spots of gray. Fittingly took this care about the dead, and you too fittingly. And justly you will drive pollution from the land. I will not serve a distant friend's advantage, but act in my own interest. Whoever he was that killed the king may readily wish to dispatch me with his murderous hand. So helping the dead king, I help myself. Come, children, take your suppliant bowels and go, says Oedipus, right? Up from the altars now, call the assembly and let it meet upon the understanding that I'll do everything. Okay, so here we have Oedipus is, by the way, notice how revelatory and relevant this is to the now, right? Because the one thing that they tell us is the pollution is actually not the pollution. The pollution is not the climate pollution, right? I mean, yes, there is pollution, right? There's pollution caused by, there's the pollution caused by, the DARPA ions and the silver, oxide and the cadmium. Shouts out to Kristen at Slow Boy Whiteboard. Go see her streams, especially on CHEM trails, right? That's what's causing the pollution in that sense. It's not us not, recycling our Red Bull cans or whatever. But the real pollution is the sin, right? Is the sin of living in society without God, degradation, degeneration, twisted activities, evil that we see every day, right? That's the pollution. And Oedipus doesn't realize that he has committed this pollution, and that to solve it, he himself is going to have to do something about it. He's going to have to change. He's going to have to repent, right? And he's going to stare into the abyss and come to terms with what he himself has done, and he's going to see his own reflection in the mirror, right? His mind will split in a sense, and he will gouge out his eyes from what he sees. He can't stand the sight of his own self because he realizes that he's acted demonically. This is pretty hardcore, right? Just getting into this play. Let's skip to, let's see. I'm going to go to some other scenes here. Okay, this is where Oedipus comes across Tiresias. And we have a role reversal here. Okay, here we go. In this book here, this is page 20. Page 20 of this book. And he says, I don't know what the problem is. It looks fine on the video here. Me. Oh, chat. I will pay him. Let's have some one of you to shield a guilt any from their homes, since he is a champion of the god. And the twist of ours is dead, and one that fortune leaper things I fight in his everything he unwittingly cursed himself.